Hello. It is the most significant levy imposed on London's motorists since the congestion charge. Today, the toxicity charge came into force. Its target older, more polluting vehicles, the drivers of which will now pay an extra £10 to enter central London. It is Sadiq Khan's first major move as mayor aimed at reducing air pollution in the capital. But does it go far enough? And is it targeting the right drivers? Well, political correspondent Simon Harris reports on what the mayor has dubbed the world's toughest toxicity charge.
Day one of the T-charge and motorists might be forgiven for not knowing. The congestion charge warning signs make no mention of the new pollution tax. But from 7 o'clock this morning, anyone with an engine deemed by City Hall to be dirty faced a fee of £10 on top of the C-charge.
I think it's disgusting. It's just another way of taking money out of people.
For me to have to pay what it would effectively be over 20 quid, that's a lot of money.
It's got to be done, isn't it? Be green, innit? Save the world, save the earth, yeah.
Faiz Ali Shah runs a small removals business in East London. His customers can't afford higher prices and he can't afford a new van. So to avoid the T-charge, he says he'll be forced to take lengthy detours.
If we are avoiding a congestion charge, so we will be driving around more extra 15, 20 miles, so which would be an extra combustion for the engine. So it would affect the environment a lot more than the T-charge.
Obviously, the T-charge will affect poorer families and small businesses because they're the people who tend to have older vehicles. There's not a lot of them in London, but to them it's very important. You're affecting people's ability to provide employment to the most vulnerable people in London.
Do you accept that this charge will hit some of the poorest Londoners?
Well, look, I accept that there are families, charities and businesses who have the oldest vehicles. They're the most pollution vehicles. I'm encouraging those that can to move to a cleaner form of car or van or minibus. Those that can to use public transport or to walk and cycle.
And those who can't afford to?
That's why the government's going to step in.
The mayor wants the government to bankroll a diesel scrappage scheme. So far his calls have gone unanswered. It's thought around 9,000 vehicles a day will be hit by the T-charge. But it doesn't cover some of the capital's most polluted streets. This is the Marylebone Road, one of the worst in London for poor air quality. It's on the edge of the congestion zone, but not in it, which means here the T-charge doesn't apply. It's more than 14 years since the launch of the congestion charge. London's first modern-day road toll was regarded as a huge gamble by then-Mayor Ken Livingstone. The stakes are equally high for the current occupant of City Hall, but some pressure groups think he's not going fast or far enough.
We are going to need to see more measures. We're going to need to see them coming in sooner than is planned and applying ultimately to all of London.
Photo calls with children are a familiar theme in the Mayor's clean air crusade. Today was no different. There will no doubt be more when he unveils his next move, the ultra-low emission zone affecting thousands of diesel vehicles in 2020. Simon Harris, ITV News, Bloomsbury.
Hello. It has disrupted and infuriated passengers on Southern Rail for more than 18 months. But the end of the long-running dispute between the company and their drivers could finally be in sight. But they aren't conceding without a bumper pay rise. To end the row over driver-only operated trains, union members are voting on a proposed 28.5% pay rise over the next 5 years. At a time when some public sector pay is capped at 1%, it is perhaps a little surprised that many commuters are less than impressed. More from our political correspondent Simon Harris.
Another summer has turned to autumn and southern commuters are still at the mercy of the rail unions. For 18 months, passengers have endured delays and cancellations in a dispute over who closes the train doors. But a breakthrough could be on the cards. Members of the drivers' union ASLEF are being offered the sort of pay deal public sector workers can only dream of. A 5-year settlement which will see their salaries increase by almost a third. But it's led to a bitter rift among the rail unions, with the rival RMT describing it as a squalid and sordid financial inducement. ASLEF drivers are now voting on whether to accept the 28.5% pay increase over 5 years.
It is an extraordinarily generous offer, a 28% pay increase over 5 years, from £49,000 a year to £65,000 a year for working a 4-day week. So I think the ASLEF drivers have got an amazingly good deal.
Southern's guards or conductors have now been rebranded as onboard supervisors. Under the new agreement between Southern and ASLEF, a train can run without an onboard supervisor if they don't turn up because of last-minute sickness, if they're left behind on the platform, or they leave the train to deal with an emergency. The row over trains operating with just a driver has led to more than 30 strikes by the RMT, which is now calling on ASLEF members to reject the deal.
Nothing of any substance has changed on safety, and I think there's a financial inducement for drivers to acknowledge and accept that driver-only operation is the norm.
Have you been stitched up?
I don't want to use language like that, but we're not very happy.
But it could be the end of the line for the RMT dispute if ASLEF drivers accept the offer from their bosses.
I can't believe that they would turn it down, and that will antagonise the RMT, who eventually, I somewhat suspect, will just have to cave in and accept similar conditions.
But the RMT isn't ready to roll over yet. Today it announced more strikes on Southern and, for the first time, a walkout by its members on South Western railway services from Waterloo.
Well, Simon joins me now. Simon, this dispute might be closer to being resolved, but there's still no end to the strikes.
No. This is the third time that the ASLEF executive has recommended its drivers accept a deal from Southern. It hasn't done until they haven't done until now, but that might change with this huge pay offer. But the RMT are still planning more strikes on Southern. Now, Southern says that the RMT strikes by guards, conductors, onboard supervisors, call them what you like, doesn't really have much impact now. And it's true, there really is only a problem when strikes are carried out by drivers. But for the first time, the strikes are spreading to what is now South Western Railway, used to be South West Train services out of Waterloo. And that could have an impact because all of those trains do have guards on them. By the way, the strikes are being timed 48 hours on November the 8th, the very day of the ASLEF ballot result.
Oh, all right, Simon, thank you. It is all but impossible to completely protect a city from a terror attack, but London's mayor said today the government needs to free up more money to improve security measures here. After the Westminster attack in March, temporary anti-terror bollards were installed on several London bridges, but critics say they are unsightly and ineffective. Well, Sadiq Khan says a more long-term solution is needed, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Caution. Bollards in motion.
Fortress London, where bollards and barriers are the new normal. They include makeshift metal walls which have sprung up on bridges across the Thames, along with a range of obstacles to stop terrorists driving in bike lanes or onto pavements. London's mayor claims we need even more. They need to be permanent and the government should foot the bill.
We've got to make sure our bridges are as safe as they can be, because on bridges you can't escape except jumping off the bridge, which is very dangerous. That's why we now have temporary barriers on a number of bridges, but we need permanent barriers as soon as possible.
The mayor wants money to defend ceremonies like Trooping the Colour and popular events like the Notting Hill Carnival and New Year's Eve fireworks. Parliament is already one of the best protected sites in London. But even here, some of the barriers have a temporary and unsightly appearance.
They're pretty ugly. They are obviously temporary, and they look like the result of a city that is frightened. It's right that we should protect Parliament, but it's shameful that we should do it this openly. It makes us look frightened, and we shouldn't.
The new Ring of Steel even has a name, the National Barrier Asset.
The barriers don't have to be hideous. These protecting government buildings in Whitehall appear to be ornate stonework, but hidden inside is reinforced steel embedded in concrete. They're strong enough to stop a speeding truck.
They might be here to stay, but not everyone is convinced.
As far as terrorist attacks go, they're not going to choose a route with bollards. Of course they're not. They'll just go somewhere else. I mean, a child could work that out. So unless you're going to bollard the whole of London, it's really quite pointless. And every time we do this sort of thing, it's a victory for terrorists.
Isn't installing barriers an acknowledgement that the terrorists have won?
Look, terrorists are finding new ways to try and harm us, trying to find new ways to kill and injure. We've got to evolve and find new ways to keep us safe.
And there are more subtle ways to create defences. For a masterclass, look no further than Arsenal's Emirates Stadium, where strategically placed ornamental cannons and concrete benches double up as car-stopping barriers.
So Simon, it's clear that effective yet subtle safety measures are possible, but does it all just come down to money at the end of the day?
Well, the barriers at the Emirates are more simple, more straightforward than some of those that we've seen springing up in London. And of course, they were paid for by the private sector, the football club. What Sadiq Khan is talking about is clearly going to cost an awful lot more, probably tens of millions of pounds, although we don't know the precise bill for that. We do know that the temporary barriers on 8 London bridges at the moment have so far cost £500,000. And we're a month away from the budget, so the Mayor, the Met and the London boroughs are at this moment trying to make the case for the government to spend more money. Tonight, the Home Office said to us it would do everything it could or needed to keep Londoners safe, and it was engaging with the police to see what demands they face.
All right, Simon Harris, thank you. Hello. The controversial idea, which would have allowed hospital patients recovering from surgery to recuperate in the spare bedrooms of members of the public, was abandoned today following a furious backlash. Southend Hospital in Essex said it had no intention of going ahead with the plan at this time. Politicians and health groups widely criticised the suggestion, which would have involved homeowners being paid up to £50 per patient per night. Our political correspondent Simon Harris on the proposal and how it was quickly abandoned.
It's one of Southend's trademarks, the seaside bed and breakfast. But now the Essex Holiday Resort could be about to pioneer a radical new form of short-stay accommodation. Local people are being invited to take in recovering patients from Southend Hospital in a move to free up beds. Anti-cuts campaigners are horrified.
Our main concern is the safeguarding that the NHS is planned to put vulnerable people, frail elderly people, out into what is essentially bed and breakfast accommodation with members of the public with very limited training and no medical knowledge.
This is the leaflet handed out in the hospital by the company behind the pilot scheme, Care Rooms. So-called hosts are told they can earn £50 a night, £1,000 a month. No one from the hospital would talk to us today. Managers issued a statement saying there was no intention to support the pilot. However, the statement didn't appear to rule out the idea. It went on, "We will not support this pilot until the necessary safeguarding and quality arrangements are in place and there has been full engagement and discussion with our local communities on the proposal." In the House of Lords today, a Labour peer voiced concern.
Will the government not listen to the medical opinion and drop this preposterous scheme?
That is, I should stress, a local pilot that is being explored. It's not, I don't think, even underway. It has been proposed by a local doctor, indeed an emergency registrar, and for it to go ahead, it is clearly the case that any such pilot would have to abide by the very strict rules that exist in terms of safety, safeguarding, quality and so on.
Leanne Crabb runs a patients' watchdog in Southend and thinks the idea is worth considering.
There's possibilities in it for getting beds freed up at the hospital, and also possibly, if people are treated well, then less readmissions back into hospital, which is also a problem, people going home and bouncing straight back into hospital. So there could be a plus side to it if it's very well thought out, but I think that a lot more engagement needs to be done.
Care Rooms, the company behind the proposal, said tonight it was still working on the details and wasn't prepared to discuss the pilot scheme until it's approved by the NHS. Simon Harris, ITV News, Southend.